Are you transgender? How do you know if you're transgender? Let's talk about that now. Automass photo. Hi everyone. We are going to be discussing how to tell if you are transgender. As a disclaimer, please be aware that I am not a doctor and cannot diagnose you. Furthermore, don't use this information to diagnose yourself. This information is presented to individuals that are legally old enough to decide on their own if they are transgender. I cannot be held liable if you are young and get information out of this video that wasn't appropriately presented to you. If you feel you are transgender or different from what you were born as, the best advice I could give before we even begin this is to gather your thoughts and truly figure out what you want. Only you can decide that. While information online can help you get some answers, you cannot rely on it to define you. Only you can define who you are. With some thorough thinking and time, even if you are young and not of legal age to make your own decisions, transgender issues can naturally resolve themselves without any intervention. Transgender is a term used to describe individuals that identify as something other than their birth sex. For instance, I was born male, but identify as female and transition to live my life as a woman. Not every trans person would transition, and there are varying levels of dysphoria they feel. Gender dysphoria, also known as gender identity disorder, is the key sign to tell if you are transgender. Gender dysphoria is when someone feels uncomfortable with the sex they were born as and identifies as a different gender. If you do not experience gender dysphoria, then it is unlikely that you are transgender. The reason for this being because this is the main trait that defines transgender people. It could be minor or severe. Something that defines you as male or woman, your body, your social interactions, whatever you feel comfortable with as it pertains to your gender. I have a video dedicated to the realism of gender dysphoria, so I have an annotation and a link in the description if you would like to check that one out. Some people like to compare being transgender to that of body dysmorphic disorder, which is a mental disorder where an individual obsesses over flaws with their physical body. If we look at gender dysphoria, it indeed is very similar, but it's specific to that of someone's birth sex not matching the gender they identify as. Maybe it's your breasts or lack of breasts, genitals, deep or non-deep voice, facial or lack of facial hair, and so on. The things that define male and female on a biological level and the changes that ensue during puberty. Men having the penis and other skeletal changes, while women having breasts and vagina and other skeletal changes, all during puberty. So in order for a trans person to combat this, they will transition to relieve that dysphoria. That is why gender dysphoria is the #1 trait. Someone's dysphoria can vary from not so much to extreme and life-threatening. And transitioning may be the only way to alleviate that. Some trans people may not transition at all, while others go through hormones and surgery. There is no such thing as being trans enough or not trans enough to be considered transgender. As long as you experience dysphoria related to the characteristics that define you as the sex you were born as you don't identify with that, then you are transgender. But how do you know you experience dysphoria? Perhaps you are unhappy with something as it directly pertains to the sex you were born as and the puberty you went through. If you were born male and went through male puberty, yet don't like or associate with male things and like more female things as what you determine as female in relation to your society, maybe you like women's clothing, makeup, or other characteristics that you feel make females female. Maybe if you were born female and went through female puberty and dislike your breasts and desire to have more of a male chest, Whatever you feel, you fall on this gender spectrum of male and female. The only way you'll know is if you actually try it and experiment. For trans people who have transitioned to the opposite sex they were born as, it's not uncommon for them to experiment prior. Maybe they experiment with clothing and seeing what that feels like, makeup, tucking, binding, whatever else, before they go through with transitioning. You don't need to transition to be transgender, but trans people usually always change in some way and how they present themselves to the world. Changing even minor things that they feel is necessary for them to alleviate the dysphoria. How would this differ from being gay? Let's say a gay man doesn't like the typical male things and perhaps dresses in women's clothing. Just because they may portray a part of themselves as feminine doesn't mean they have dysphoria related to their gender. A gay man will identify as male despite what his interests are. He doesn't feel it necessary for people to call him a her and be perceived as a woman by society. Rather, he may just like some women's things. That is the biggest difference, since if this person was transgender, they would identify as something other than a man and want to be perceived differently than a man from others. What makes someone transgender? Some theorize it has to do with hormone changes in the womb prior to birth, perhaps even related to the mother's diet during pregnancy, as well as other physiological changes that occur before a baby is developed with male and female genitals and brain development. Others theorize that it's a mental disorder, usually a dissociative one, caused by trauma and abuse, neglect and abandonment of a mother or father figure, and so on. Some even believe it's due to environmental factors prior to puberty, such as toxins in the food, water, air, hormone imbalance, or the child being exposed to transgender topics before they really understand it, often through internet research and their parents not explaining it to them. What if I told you that all of these theories can and do play an impact on the development of transgender feelings? Everyone feels transgender for different reasons. For some trans people, they realize it is a mental disorder and realize it is due to their past they have developed these feelings. Others have never experienced this sort of trauma, and perhaps it was caused by something else. There are many potential reasons, and there is no one-size-fits-all. Everyone is different. Not everyone who is transgender is transsexual, in that they identify as the opposite sex they were born as. There are other genders that people choose to identify as that deviate from the typical male and female. However, when you really study this, it's often not different genders, but rather variations of male and female. You can identify as entirely on the male end or entirely on the female end, be born on one end and identify on the other opposite end, or even fluctuate between these two ends, male and female, and so on. But to deny the human experience and the male and female sex that exists on this planet indicates that there could be a deeper rooted problem. We all have male and female aspects of ourselves that exist within us. We are male and female on this planet because that is how we, as mammals, reproduce. We forget this very basic concept that we are animals that reside on this earth with all other living creatures. We have evolved over time to be intelligent creatures we are today, but so intelligent as to deny how we got here in the first place, our roots, which is male and female. If you believe we have a spirit as part of a source consciousness, it is often genderless or sexless, since male and female are simply here on this earth as a means to procreate and continue the evolution of the species. Without male and female and the ability to reproduce with penis and vagina, sperm and egg, then our species would die out. The last thing I wanted to mention was that from comments people have left on my videos, there are few terms floating around that I wanted to mention. One being transgender. This term is supposedly used to describe people who identify as transgender because of a trend and attention, and will often experience no dysphoria. And another term, true scum, used to define transgender people who think gender dysphoria is necessary for being transgender. I personally have been accused of the latter. These two words are made up and simply don't exist. I don't know where they came from, who made them up, and I don't personally care for them. I find them to be irrelevant in every context as they don't apply in any context. Someone can identify as whatever they like, but the term transgender cannot be changed to suit the needs of these so-called transgender individuals. From my observation, it appears that those that have been labeled as transgender individuals are those that often use the term true scum to essentially shame trans people who feel dysphoria and for the judgment they receive for not experiencing dysphoria and not fitting in, usually desperately trying to fit in by calling themselves transgender when they actually aren't. You cannot be depressed without feelings of chronic sadness, nor can you have post-traumatic stress disorder without experienced past trauma, and so on. So the label of transgender is defined as gender dysphoria. Even minor dysphoria can still classify, but to experience none whatsoever simply means that you are not transgender. I am all about getting to the root of the issues, addressing them and overcoming them. For some transgender individuals, the feelings of wanting to be the opposite sex is purely to dissociate and distance themselves from their birth sex, perhaps due to trauma and or hatred of themselves. These individuals may be transgender due to a psychological condition as opposed to a physiological condition. Regardless, these feelings are very real, and even addressing the past traumas and coping with any form of dissociation may not be enough for some, and transitioning in some way may be necessary to relieve the dysphoria associated with this condition. So the conclusion here is that being transgender is not one size fits all. There are variations and people experience varying levels of gender dysphoria. Whatever you feel you are, try it out and see how you actually like it. Only you can define yourself and how you feel you are. If you have any other input on this topic, I would love to hear it, so please feel free to leave a comment and let me know what you agree or disagree with, and or how this has helped you or someone close to you. I hope this information was informative and helpful to you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for watching my video. If you would like more content, please feel free to subscribe.